Good morning, everyone. This is Michael, and maybe as you could tell from some of the sounds here, it's tough to be the engineer and the presenter at the same time. But welcome to you, and we're going to review some of the important things about the souls of nations and your participation in your own country. Right. So, the very first thing, I think, is to have some readings from Master Decay from the Destiny of the Nations. And I'm using a little different method here, so you should be able to see some of what I'm reading as I'm reading it. And the musical component of today's meditation will not be extensive because the iPod, well, as you know, we're having a little difficulty with that. But nothing that resources will not solve. So we have read up to the point about the energy flowing through the hierarchy. And that's where we are at the present moment. And this energy flowing through the hierarchy at this time, the energy of love, wisdom, really, is seeking to blend that which is flowing out of Shambhala and is needed in order to make the desired application of it. We have seen what happened when during the Second World War, the major attack upon humanity and its survival on this planet, we have seen what happened when the inverted Shambhala force had no love accompanying it at all. So, love is needed in order to apply the will. The problem of the hierarchy at this time is to produce a wise and adequate fusion of the Shambhala and the hierarchical energies, and thus temper destruction and bring to the fore the spirit of construction. You know, the first ray is working through the planetary center, London. Lots of Vulcan is there, and where you have Vulcan and the first ray, you can oftentimes get the spirit of construction rather than destruction. So, a wise and adequate fusion of Shambhala and hierarchical energies, and thus temper destruction and bring to the fore the spirit of construction, setting in motion the building and rehabilitating forces of the second ray energy. And just think about Gemini, you know, the forces of reconstruction, and think about the idea that through Gemini, as it is usually presented by the Tibetan, the ray transmitted is the second ray of love wisdom. The Shambhala energy prepares the way for the energy of the hierarchy, oftentimes through destruction, clearing the ground on which the new construction must be undertaken through. Through destruction, the space for construction is cleared. And, you know, we will probably see a lot of that now as we're at the end of the Piscean Age and, in a sense, going through a kind of pralaya with respect to the Piscean civilization as we prepare for entirely new possibilities with the Aryan civilization. So, thus it has been from the beginning of time, at least I suppose, well, he's not just talking about our planet really, because these great septenates extend far beyond our local cosmos system. You can find them at the very height of the universe, and when does time begin and when does it end? Well, at least every time, look at our language there, every time there is a universe, there is time, and the only timeless state is the absoluteness between universes, but then the factor of time seems to enter in via the back door. So it's a paradoxical kind of issue. But anyway, thus it has been from the beginning of time, but the cycles of hierarchy, though relatively frequent, well, along the line of the 5, 50, 500, 5,000, 50,000, that kind of thing. Those are the cycles of hierarchy on the line of 5. The cycles of hierarchy have not coincided with those of Shambhala, which are rare and infrequent. As time progresses, the impact of the Shambhala force will be more frequent, and we've seen that, until this time, the individualization of animal man and the destruction of the Atlantean civilization were the two, kinds of interventions of Shambhala into the progress of what would become humanity. But lately, there's been a great crescendo and a speeding up. 1825, 1975, 2000, in less than 200 years, there have been 3 Shambhala impacts. But before that, it took millions of years to have even 2. Hitherto it has been too dangerous an energy to apply to mankind, for the results have worked out destructively, except in the Lemurian crisis, which actually set the whole 4th kingdom on its path, and actually, on our planet at least, created the 4th kingdom, which we call humanity. Its work has therefore been confined almost entirely to the hierarchy, which is interesting. Shambhala working upon hierarchy, because hierarchy is the ashram of Sanat Kumara. So it's been confined almost entirely to hierarchy, whose members are equipped to handle it and to assimilate it correctly, and also to use it for the benefit of humanity. Now the experiment, and notice how often when hierarchy does something it is called an experiment, and they advise that kind of scientific Uranian attitude for us also. Now the experiment is being attempted of permitting man to receive it and its impact free from the mediation of the hierarchy. It may prove a premature and abortive effort, but the issues are not yet determined, and the Lord of Shambhala, with his assistants, and with the aid of the watching members of hierarchy, are not discouraged over the initial results. I guess this is going to go on for a fairly long time before some sort of final judgment. It kind of reminds you of the last couple of root races in Lemuria, where until that time it was not known whether the, let's call it the experiment of the solar angels, was going to work out. But by the last couple of root races in Lemuria and among the more highly developed people, it was seen, yes, it is working out. And here too we see humanity is responding unexpectedly well, which is certainly encouraging. There has been much success along this line, but the results do not appear with clarity to intelligent human beings because they refuse to see anything except the destructive aspect and the disappearance of the forms to which they have hitherto anchored their emotions, their desire, their mental perception. So it's the problem which the Buddha came to solve, the problem of attachment to the phenomenal worlds. We have to realize that although a nation may last a long time, it doesn't last forever. Nothing does. And the root races come and go, and the planetary incarnations come and go, and the universes come and go. So we must sustain that perspective and not hang on to appearances. So this is where we fall down, he's telling us, and hopefully by studying the nations from the higher perspective, we will no longer fall down as we have. People are failing. They fail as yet to see the irrefutable evidence of constructive activity and of true creative work. Always the plan is advancing, basically. That's what he's saying. The temple of humanity in the New Age is rising rapidly. It's a seventh ray age, after all, and the seventh ray people are the temple builders. So the temple of humanity in the New Age is rising rapidly, but its outlines cannot be seen because men are occupied entirely with their individual or national, selfish point of view. Now, after the second initiation, there is a reduction in the degree to which selfishness affects the consciousness, and then perhaps by the time the third degree is taken, people will in fact begin to see the outlines of the temple of humanity, a very beautiful thought. So at first, though, they have the selfish point of view, and it's accompanied with personal and national instincts coming, from the lower part of the person or the nation. I would here like to call your attention to the fact that the instinctual life of nations is something which remains to be studied scientifically, and is a phase which leads inevitably to the individualistic life of nations, a matter of more immediate interest. Well, nations go through the same process as will the individual, and I guess people are instinctual, and then they are individualistic, and then at last they are individual, which suggests, if you were to look at the word, that they are indivisible with respect to themselves and to the greater environment. So for a little while, well, let's see here. There is this discussion about the energy of love, but I think what I'm going to do is wait until the time has come. If I can just get this to back up a little bit, not so easy. Let's see. Well, I don't know why this is happening, but it is happening. Yeah, okay. So, whoop, this one I thought everything was in order. All right. So I'm going to say then that this is the end, if I can do that. I'm working in a different format entirely, okay? So I think I'm not going to be able to, yes, it takes quite a while to get this to come through. So let's see if I have this correctly. I have to kind of whack the keyboard here, which tells me that my battery may be going out. And today is, and this time is 20 July and 19. So, just a little bit of a warm-up, because basically what we have here is a meditation, but I really have to recommend the reading of this book, The Destiny of the Nations. Now you see, it wasn't really prepared until after the war. That's when it all came together, and it's not a long book, but it is something that is really of great value and will give us the Tibetan's perspective on international relations. So I'm not quite sure how to use this program yet, but I do know that it is one that actually shows up on the vMix that I'm using to broadcast to you at this time. Okay. Now let's think a little further and switch our... See, the words of a master, D.K. warned us. He said, look, don't water down my words. Did he use that? I mean, thinking that you would reach people easier if they could just somehow understand, in your own language and so forth. Well, there's always the tendency to do that, and it reduces the potency of the master's words. So I'm very much for the idea that together we are reading these books, The Glamour World Problem, The Destiny of the Nations, The Reappearance of the Christ, and other books as we go along, because we are in this period, and it's very important for human progress that the esotericists of the world, or the student esotericists, assimilate what has been given to them. And we have about 6 years to do that. So we are in the field of light. We try to realize that. And the field, see, everybody, every form is really a condensation of light, and so we try to visualize that we are all condensed light. I guess in a way Einstein's formula proved that, There was a tremendous release of energy from the condensation, light and heat, and essentially what was destructive power, the liberation, in one way, of the power of the atoms. And we're in the field of love with each other, which does not mean, sentimental attraction. It basically means that we see the soul in each other, and we do all we can through our words and deeds to advance the development of the soul in others. All of this being done under the great world teacher, the Lord Maitreya, and still for another 2,000, maybe 2,000, almost 500 years, he will be with us, guiding, before both he and the Buddha pass together on to greater service possibilities. They were initiated together in an Atlantean fourth ray ashram, and it kind of looks like they're continuing their initiatic association and will pass before the one initiator, I suppose, climaxing the seventh initiation. And that one initiator, we are told, at the seventh degree is the planetary logos itself. Well, the world as we know it, and divided according to the mind of man, of course. When you go, I think it was Einstein that said, look, you're in an airplane and you look down, where are the boundary marks of the various countries that man has conceived? And we know that the Tibetan wanted us without passports and visas and other things of that nature, at least to work ourselves into that position where we could all pass freely from one place to another and develop that fellowship which would prove to so many that humanity really is one. So be in your soul space at this point. At least imaginatively put yourself there as if you were more a soul than a personality. And you will perceive more, and from a unitive point of view, and the group, in a way, will become your more real self, more real than the individual self with which, maybe I should say the individualistic self, with which you have identified yourself for so many thousands and perhaps even millions of years. It will be an action of the heart that gives this a group identification. But then we think of all human beings on this planet. How many there are, we don't know internally and externally. There are some mysteries connected with that, because 6/7 of any group of incarnators is supposed to be out of incarnation at any one time, well, that would be a problem, because maybe we've got 7 billion on the planet now, or 8 billion. Let's suppose it's 8. And this 6 times 8, it would mean that there are how many human units? Something like 56 billion. But it's probably a suspicious figure, because in the entire solar system, we're told there are only 60 billion. So anyway, billions of human beings, and we'll have to reserve judgment about the exact number. But there is this soul of humanity, so let's try to tune in with it. So it's as if wherever we go and whomever we see, we really know that person. And in a way it gets a little philosophical, but we've never been separated essentially from that person or any other emanation forever. We're always familiar, and more than familiar, we are identified. So we look at the soul of humanity. And within that soul of humanity are the souls of nations, as they have been magnetically created according to certain talismans which have been planted. It's not just that people begin to gather someplace. A lot of it is very much pre-planned. And maybe we identify particularly with a particular nation. I mean, eventually we'll identify with the soul of humanity entirely, but when we think of our nation of origin and our citizenship, we may travel over the world, but we are the responsible citizen in a particular nation. So think about yours. Which is that nation for you, with which you are deeply identified? And, what is that nation supposed to offer to the grouping of nations and their various qualities, both rheological and astrological? It's the contribution our nation makes that's important, and that contribution will increase as the causal body is built, the causal body of nations. And you have a role in that. So let's see. Here is, it's not complete by any means, but it's a picture or tabulation of qualities from the rheological perspective and from the national motto, notice there are no, at least given, any third-ray soul nations. But the Christ is returning, and his hierarchy of love is returning, and there are only given here 2 second-ray soul nations. Others are listed on different rays, but not the third, at least from the soul perspective. So overall, it's a second ray kind of development. We need to unify the nations and make them cooperative. So let's think about that. Our nation, how we can help to improve and build the causal body of our nation, whether or not it's listed here. So often he doesn't list everything, especially on the same page. And your particular nation may be given astrological ray qualities, or astrological qualities, let's say, but the rays are left unconfirmed. But still something can be found for most nations. So think about it. Your nation is trying to make a certain contribution. What is it? And how are you helping? How can you help? So it's the quality of contribution of your nation, its soul quality, which has to be given, and you, too, have a quality of contribution, maybe many, but maybe something paramount that you are giving to the causal body of your nation so that it can give to the grouping of nations. So maybe every day for 1 or 2 minutes we can think about our soul radiation and how it's helping to build the soul of our nation through its egoic lotus, through its causal body, and moreover and eventually helping to build the soul of humanity. Don't ever become discouraged because, after all, each one of us is just one of a number of billion units. Nevertheless, we make our difference through our ongoing and steady cooperation. So, if you don't have given by the Tibetan a ray for the soul or for the personality, which must become eventually like a sub-soul ray, then examine your nation closely and make your own estimation, because in most cases you will have the astrological quality. Like here, let's just say I'm, living quite a bit in Finland, and it's given a Capricorn soul and an Aries personality, but nothing more. But I can tell from living here that it has a very strong seventh ray, perhaps correlating with the Capricorn soul, through which more seventh ray comes than through any other sign. And maybe there's quite a valiant first ray going on with this Aries personality, a bit like the little giant, but I would have to also suggest the fourth ray as the peacemaker. And you can do the same if you're living in a nation for which the rays are not given. Just examine carefully the ray life of your nation. You can find a way to do that. This book is so useful in that respect. And as we go through it, and meanwhile discuss the soul of nations, in other words, specific nations, then we'll really learn how people live everywhere. I was amazed the other week, Tuya did a presentation on Bahrain. It's a Gulf little kingdom. And I thought, well, it's just another one of those little kingdoms in the Middle East. But when you really look closely, it had some very fascinating, distinguishing features which pointed to the way it could be spiritually successful in the future. And thus it is for so many of these nations that, well, if you're like me, that we don't know too much about it. But we will learn in this particular series of broadcasts going on over the years. So let's just realize, with respect to the earth and its humanity and its various kingdoms, a great inclusiveness. We'll pause on that. That we won't separate out or divide one from another or one nation from another, but a great inclusiveness which comes with realizing the one humanity. Because, so many esotericists, they say, well, I'm not so interested in politics. But DK took us to task on that one. And he basically said, look, it conditions so many people. You have to have an interest in politics, in the way, in governance of the various nations and of humanity as a whole. Now, I'm not sure that I can do what I hope to do right now. I'm going to give it a try. And we'll see whether it works. And looks like it might work. And there's the great invocation. So, this little meditation has not been as full of variety and different insights and music and so forth. But given the condition of our broadcasting system at the moment, it's what can be done, and you can read along as we work with the destiny of the nations. As I say, a wonderful little book, and of course, if the Tibetan expands upon it, when he begins to offer his third installment, it will be, I think, very interesting, because since he wrote, I don't know, have 50 or 60 different nations appeared. Many of them in their early developmental stage. We can't imagine that every nation is completely ready to express its soul. Even the well-established nations are having a lot of difficulty doing that, and the selfish personality is the one that's more likely to assert itself. But all in good time, and there will be presented possibilities for every group of people, drawn magnetically together by interior factors of which we know very little, will be able to make their contribution to the one great soul of humanity. So let us close our little reflection here with the great invocation, which I've, of course you know it. Many know it by heart, but I'm just putting it up here on the screen, hoping that it is showing. And we recite together this great word of power, this invocation for light and power. And of course love is there too, but he does call it the invocation for light and power. Very old, and released by Shambhala in relation to the second ray, when the Christ decided he would absolutely appear physically among men for the next 2,500 years approximately. So let us together the great invocation. From the point of light within the mind of God, let light stream forth into the minds of men. Let light descend on earth. From the point of love within the heart of God, let love stream forth into the hearts of men. May Christ return to earth. From the center where the will of God is known, let purpose guide the little wills of men, the purpose which the masters know and serve. From the center, which we call the race of men, let the plan of love and light work out, and may it seal the door where evil dwells. Let light and love and power restore the plan on earth. Ooh. Well, thank you, everyone. A little bit different sort of meditation under the circumstances. Tuya will be gone for a little while, and we're working out whether she's heading up to the Little Bear Meditation Center, which we have above the Arctic Circle, and maybe one day you'll get to visit it and see some beautiful Arctic scenery and meditate in a powerful way. So we're working on that to make it possible for people to join us. So just very grateful that you've all come along, and I can't really write anything in the chat box right now because my keyboard is also teaching me who's boss, and right now it has the upper hand. So many blessings to you, and we'll be continuing tomorrow morning with the attraction of money for hierarchical purposes. It is needed, and when you think about how money is spent in the world and what we value and what we create, we just have to turn all that around. So many blessings, lots of love, and we'll be with you, and we'll keep announcing what we are doing. So, see you before long.